So one of the more interesting things to happen over time was, in Disney's Animal Kingdom, there was the plan to create the Beastly Kingdom, and it was going to be part of the Animal Kingdom, so you were going to have dinosaurs, and you were going to have live animals, and then you were going to have dragons. They actually talked about these dragons and these other things that were going to be coming to the park, and they never did. They never materialized. And actually, the area that they had planned to use for it is this area here, which is currently Pandora Land. And for some period of time after the park opened, they decided to lightly theme it and call it Camp Mini Mickey. And it had some greeting trails where you could go up and meet Mickey Mouse and some of his friends. And there were some other things around. The Festival of the Lion King was here, and a couple of other things. But they really never did anything with the land per se. They just kind of used it for that for some period of time. And the Beastly Kingdom was always on the back burner, and it sat there for a long time. They talked about it, kept coming back up in some of their promotional materials, but then it never came to pass. And then when they got the rights to Avatar Land, this was the obvious place to put it because they already had the land available and didn't have anything planned for it. And there was nothing permanent here. So they moved the Festival of the Lion King over to Africa where it really belongs, and then just moved the meeting of where you can meet Mickey and Minnie to other places, and it just made sense. So now you have Avatar Land here, and it's kind of neat, but it misses the essence of what was really the Beastly Kingdom and something really different, something so completely unique that Disney had never thought of before. And it's too bad. I wonder what that would have actually looked like had it come to fruition. In episode 39, we talked about dinosaurs. And in this video, I said we were going to talk about dinosaurs, sort of. And we will. I'll get back to the dinosaurs a little bit toward the end of the video. But in the meantime, let's talk about the Animal Kingdom. With the Beastly Kingdom not coming into play, they still had Dino Land and the Live Animal Park, which was a zoo, but Disney was very careful in marketing it as not a zoo.
Not a zoo.
Not a zoo.
Disney's Animal Kingdom, it's many, many things, but remember it's not a zoo!
So the question is, what happened to the Beastly Kingdom? And the answer lies, somewhat surprisingly, in Euro Disney, or what became Disneyland Paris. Euro Disney was this park that was conceived between the Walt Disney Company and a French company to create something that was like Disneyland in Europe. Unfortunately, there were a lot of issues around it, and attendance never got to the level they wanted it to in the first couple of years. In fact, by 1995, you saw a lot of headlines like these: Euro Disney in danger of shutdown, Eisner says Euro Disney may close, and so on. It was a real threat that it was going to be a problem and they might have to close it at some point. By 1995, there were starting to be more articles about how Disney really had to rethink their strategy because it probably wasn't going to work out. The entirety of the Walt Disney Company was doing really well, except for Euro Disney, so they had to make some decisions about what they were going to do. And one of the first things they did was to start to cut some of the ideas that never had started. So things like the Beastly Kingdom never got off the ground. And then Disney did somewhat the unthinkable. In July of 1994, they started laying off cast members, employees. And these cast members included a large number of Imagineers. These Imagineers were in the planning phases for all of these things like the Beastly Kingdom. And now the Imagineers had to look for other work. But they didn't have to look for very long, because Universal Studios came calling and asking the Imagineers to come to work for them as designers. And so the Imagineers took all of their creative ideas with them, and Universal decided to turn that into something valuable. In Islands of Adventure that was being opened at the time, they decided to create something called the Lost Continent. The Lost Continent included a huge number of elements that were originally intended for the Beastly Kingdom. You can see a griffin at the entrance to it. He's standing guard over it. That sort of nodded back to something that Disney had in mind. And then, of course, you had the Dueling Dragons. Dueling Dragons was an inverted roller coaster that was similar to the concept that they had inside the castle in the Beastly Kingdom where the bats were going to guard the gold. So the concept was certainly carried forward to Universal. And then, of course, there was a unicorn roller coaster. What more could you say about that than it really harkened back to what Disney was doing? So Dinoland USA became a focal point and something that Disney really wanted to focus on as they were looking for the next big thing that they could do. So Dinoland had this attraction that they created called Countdown to Extinction that was about dinosaurs and how they became extinct. They decided to modify it just a little bit and have a tie into a movie that they were creating called Dinosaur. Dinosaur was due out, and what they did was they kind of rethemed, reskinned the attraction to call it Dinosaur, and they went back and rescued an iguanodon and brought him back to current time. And where did they put this iguanodon? Why, along the river where you were going along the cruise, and they had the iguanodon waiting for you.
I think we all agree to that.
Okay, then now how are you going to explain this one?
Yeah, what is that?
It's Iguanodon. One of the researchers from the Institute built a time machine and rescued him. He's a big guy with a big appetite, but don't worry, he's strictly vegetarian. Unless you're insectivore or something there.
Well, other than that one, Keely, all other dinosaurs are extinct. They disappeared during the largest mass extinction of all times. Unfortunately, history is starting to repeat itself.
And so Disney went about creating Camp Mini Mickey to fill in the space that was originally intended for the Beastly Kingdom. Now, Camp Mini Mickey wasn't much of anything. It was a lightly themed land with some greeting trails where you could meet Mickey Mouse and friends in an open-air exhibit. They dressed in safari-themed clothes and would be out there to sign autographs and take pictures. It was kind of clever, it was neat, it was fun, it was a great way to meet Minnie and Mickey and some other characters, and there really wasn't much wait to see them. They also put the Festival of the Lion King show in the space that was nearby, and this was a great show that was in an open-air theater. Yeah, the windows were actually open and just had a roof on the top. They also put the Pocahontas themed show in that area because Pocahontas had her animal friends around her, so it made a lot of sense. Meanwhile, Universal Studios decided to up their game even more, and they created a Harry Potter-themed land by signing an exclusive agreement with J.K. Rowling to create something in that space. And they used the Imagineers they had previously hired from Disney to create all of the concepts there. Disney had to escalate and up their game as well.
In 2011, Disney announced they had struck a deal with James Cameron and Lightstorm Entertainment to bring the 2009 blockbuster Avatar to Animal Kingdom in the form of its very own land. At the cost of $500 million, Disney was going to build Pandora, the fictional planet the film takes place on. In 2014, Camp Mini Mickey closed permanently and was demolished to make way for this new land. This time, the entire expansion pad crafted just for Beastly Kingdom was maximized to bring the new land to fruition. And finally, after over 3 years of construction, the incredibly impressive Pandora: The World of Avatar opened officially to the public.
And so Disney broke out the giant blue shovels and created something called the World of Avatar, a Pandora-themed land based on James Cameron's stories. But the idea for the Beastly Kingdom never really went away. In fact, the idea for the Fantasian-themed area that they had in mind actually was incorporated into something called Fantasia Gardens, a mini golf course that exists on Disney property today. They've actually taken many of the characters and put them around throughout the course, and it's kind of evocative of what they had in mind for the original idea for that mythical sort of area within the Beastly Kingdom. And of course, the idea for the unicorn was never really lost either. In fact, Disney had already created something called Alice's Curious Labyrinth over in Disneyland Paris that was the similar kind of thing where you would go through a hedge maze and instead of finding a unicorn at the end, you would find the Cheshire Cat. So it was a similar sort of thing that they had created already that they were going to duplicate primarily in the Beastly Kingdom. Now, Disney never lost their touch for having some sort of mythological creatures. In fact, they created a Yeti that exists at Disney's Animal Kingdom along the Expedition Everest route as sort of a nod to the idea for some of the mythological creatures that they'd have. And now let's talk about dragons for a couple of minutes. If you walk along the pathway on the far side of Pandora, it actually crosses along the waterway, and you can see the dragon cave where the fire-breathing dragon originally existed. That's the one that had the knights up outside it. You can walk along that pathway and see it. You can also see the dragon that had water coming out of its mouth off to the right side of that same pathway, though it's a little harder to see it with the overgrown leaves that are around it. And now let's talk about dragons and the dragon legacy that's been left at Disney parks. There's always something interesting about dragons, and I think the mythological nature of them kind of fits in. If you look at the story they created out at Disneyland to go along with the Sorcerer Mickey, this is actually really, really cool, and it's a fully articulated audio animatronic dragon that breathes fire. It's a really cool effect that they put together here, and Mickey winds up winning the day, of course. You also had the fire-breathing, steampunk-oriented dragon that was in the daytime parade that the Magic Kingdom had at Walt Disney World for a number of years. This one is actually really cool. It's fully articulated, but yet you can kind of see how it works. But yet it gives the full effect of being a dragon with the way it moves. This is really, really cool, and they kept this effect alive for a couple of years as they had this parade going on as a central part of the parade. I thought this was a really neat idea. Now, something else cool that happened was Disney came up with an idea for a flying dragon that could breathe fire, or at least appear that way. This was a really cool effect, and I have to admit, I'm a little perplexed as to how they put this together. I'm not exactly sure how this effect is done, but I have some ideas on it. But it's really, really cool because it gives the impression of a flying dragon flying overhead around the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. And of course, we have to talk about the dragon that was going to be the template for what they were doing inside the Beastly Kingdom. When they would have the bats flying around, there was going to be a dragon that you would come up upon that would be modeled after this one that they had created at Disneyland Paris underneath Aurora's castle. This is really, really cool, and it would have been a really neat effect to see as a part of an attraction. This dragon was so well articulated, they had actually duplicated it and have a copy of it somewhere in Disney parks that they were planning to use at the Beastly Kingdom. And that's the story of dragons at Disney parks.